The father's justice. 3 hours after we buried Hannah, my phone started ringing. I was still sitting in my study, wearing the same black suit from the funeral, the fabric stiff against my shoulders, faintly damp from the cold air outside. I hadn't moved much since we got back. The house in Edgbaston felt different now, not quieter, but hollow, like something essential had been removed, and nothing knew how to fill the space. Rain slid slowly down the tall windows beside my desk, catching the weak gray light of the late afternoon. Beyond the glass, the street was empty. No cars passing, no voices. Just the steady, muted sound of water against stone and leaves. My name is William Foster. I'm 61 years old, and 3 hours ago, I stood beside a grave and watched them lower my youngest daughter into the ground. Hannah Foster, 22, brilliant, gentle, gone in less than 72 hours. The doctors had used careful words, sudden, rare, unexplained. Words that sounded precise but explained nothing. The phone kept ringing. I glanced at it, more out of habit than urgency. Most people had already said what they needed to say, the same quiet condolences, the same practiced phrases. There was nothing left anyone could offer that would make sense of what had happened. Then I saw the name, Dr. Julia Bennett, Hannah's literature professor. I remembered her standing near the casket that morning, her hands trembling as she held a single white flower, unable to speak. She had looked, not just sad, but unsettled. I answered, "Mr. Foster?" Her voice was tight, uneven, like she had been speaking too quickly or not breathing enough. "Yes." A brief pause. Then, "I need you to come to my office. Right now." I straightened slightly in my chair. "Is something wrong?" "I found something in Hannah's belongings." Her words came faster now, overlapping slightly. "You need to see it yourself." I looked toward the doorway, half expecting to hear movement somewhere in the house, but everything remained still. "Can this wait until tomorrow?" "No." The word cut through the line without hesitation, sharper than I expected. "Mr. Foster, please, come now." I stood, walking slowly toward the window, watching the rain gather along the edge of the glass before falling. "Julia, what is this about?" Her breathing filled the silence for a moment. Then her voice dropped, lower, controlled, but strained. I can't explain it over the phone. Something in the way she said that made me stop moving. "Then at least tell me if this is serious." Another pause, longer this time. "It is." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Does this have something to do with Hannah's condition?" I don't know what it has to do with yet," she said quietly. "That's why you need to come." A floorboard creaked somewhere behind me, or maybe I imagined it. I turned slightly, looking into the dim hallway, then back to the rain-streaked glass. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "No." Her voice came again, urgent now. "As soon as possible." I hesitated, then nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "All right." "And Mr. Foster." I waited. When she spoke again, each word was careful, deliberate. "Don't tell anyone you're coming." I frowned. "Why would—" "Not anyone," she repeated, cutting me off. "Please." The rain seemed louder suddenly, tapping harder against the window. "Not even your daughter." "Rachel." I didn't answer right away. "This is dangerous," she added, almost under her breath. Then the line went dead. I stood there for a moment, the phone still in my hand, listening to the empty signal, watching the rain blur the world outside into something indistinct. 3 hours after we buried Hannah, and now someone was telling me not to trust my own home. The university parking lot was nearly empty when I arrived, a thin layer of rain still clinging to the asphalt, reflecting the dull glow of overhead lights. I shut off the engine and sat for a second, listening to the quiet hum of the car cooling down, then stepped out into the cold air. The humanities building stood ahead of me, its brick exterior darkened by moisture, windows lit unevenly across several floors. A Saturday evening, no students, no voices, just wind brushing through bare trees along the walkway. Inside, The lobby lights were on, but the space felt abandoned. My footsteps echoed faintly as I crossed the tiled floor and moved toward the stairwell. The elevator seemed too slow, too enclosed, so I took the stairs instead, one hand brushing the cold metal rail as I climbed. Fourth floor. The corridor stretched long and narrow, lined with closed office doors, each one marked with a small brass plaque. Fluorescent lights flickered softly overhead, casting a pale, uneven glow across the carpet. At the far end, I saw it. Dr. Bennett's office. The door was not fully closed. A thin line of light cut across the hallway floor. As I stepped closer, voices reached me, low at first, then sharper. "I told you to leave this alone." A woman's voice, controlled, but edged with something firm, something that didn't belong in an academic office. I can't," another voice replied. Strained, uneven. "Dr. Bennett, you don't have a choice." I slowed my steps, stopping just short of the door. The air felt tighter here, as if the space itself was holding its breath. "Please, this isn't right," Dr. Bennett said. "Give it to me." A pause. Then, more forcefully, "Now." I moved closer, just enough to look through the narrow gap. Dr. Bennett stood near her desk, her back almost pressed against it, hands slightly raised as if trying to create distance. Her face looked drained of color, eyes wide, fixed on the person in front of her. And that person, for a moment, I didn't recognize what I was seeing. Rachel Foster stood there, her posture straight, one hand gripping a small blue notebook, the other held slightly forward, not quite touching, but close enough to control the space between them. Her expression wasn't the one I knew, not the calm, composed daughter who had stood beside me earlier that day, not the quiet, capable woman who had taken care of everything, while I struggled to keep up. This was something else. Her voice dropped, quieter now but sharper. "You should have given this to me already." Dr. Bennett shook her head faintly. "I needed to." Rachel stepped forward just enough to cut her off. "No, you didn't." My hand moved before I had time to think. I pushed the door open. The hinges gave a soft, uneven sound, enough to break whatever tension had filled the room. Rachel turned immediately. "Dad?" Her expression changed in an instant, the sharpness gone, replaced by something softer, almost surprised. But the notebook was still in her hand, and Dr. Bennett was still pressed against the desk, breathing as she had just been pulled back from the edge of something she didn't understand. I stood there, one step inside the doorway, looking at my daughter, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I recognized her at all. Rachel's expression softened almost instantly, the tension in her shoulders easing as she turned fully toward me, the notebook lowering just slightly in her hand. "I was just here to collect Hannah's things," she said, her voice calm, measured, the same tone she had used all week, steady, dependable. "I didn't want the university to clear out her work before we had a chance to go through it." She stepped closer, placing a light hand on my arm as if guiding me back into something familiar. "You shouldn't be out tonight, Dad. You need rest." Behind her, Dr. Bennett nodded quickly. Too quickly. Her lips pressed together, fingers gripping the edge of the desk with a stiffness that didn't match Rachel's explanation. For a moment, no one spoke. Rachel glanced back at the professor, offering a polite, almost reassuring smile. "Thank you for helping me gather everything. I'll come back next week for the rest." Dr. Bennett forced a small nod, but her eyes shifted to me again, holding for just a second, longer than necessary. There was something in that look. Not confusion, not grief. Something sharper, urgent. Rachel moved slightly, stepping between us as if closing the space. "Let's go, Dad," she said gently. I hesitated, just enough to notice Dr. Bennett's hand lift from the desk, a small movement, quick, deliberate. As Rachel guided me toward the door, something brushed against my coat. Light, barely there. I turned slightly, but Rachel was already opening the door, her attention on me. "Come on," she murmured. We stepped into the hallway. The door clicked softly behind us. Rachel walked beside me, her pace even, her posture composed, as if nothing unusual had happened inside that room. At the end of the corridor, she stopped briefly. "I'll head back separately," she said. "I just need to finish something here." I nodded, though the explanation felt incomplete. She gave a small smile, then turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the quiet of the building. Only when she disappeared around the corner did I reach into my coat pocket. My fingers found a folded piece of paper. I opened it slowly, the edges damp from the rain. The handwriting was uneven, hurried. Notebook. Her room. Under pillow. A pause in the ink, then one final word. Run. I stared at it for a long second, the fluorescent light above flickering faintly. And for the first time that night, I wasn't sure if I was being warned about something or someone. I didn't turn on the lights when I got back. I left the car at the curb and walked the rest of the way, keeping to the shadow of the hedges along the front garden. The house looked the same from the outside. Warm light behind the curtains, the faint outline of movement inside, but something about it felt closed off, as if it no longer belonged to me. I waited until the living room went still. Then I slipped in through the side door, easing it shut without a sound. Hannah's room was at the end of the hallway. I paused outside for a moment, my hand resting against the doorframe, then pushed it open. The air inside was unchanged. A faint trace of her perfume lingered near the dresser, the same soft jasmine she used every morning. Her bed was unmade, a book still open face down near the pillow, a pen resting across the pages as if she had just stepped away. Nothing had been touched. I crossed the room slowly, careful not to disturb anything, as if movement itself might erase what was left of her. The window was slightly open, letting in a thin line of cold night air that brushed against the curtains. The note in my pocket felt heavier now. I reached for the pillow. It lifted easily, and there it was. A small blue notebook, edges worn, pages slightly curled. I had seen her carry it before, always tucked under her arm, something she never left behind. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. The first entry was neat, steady. Week 1. Rachel gave me these supplements. Says they'll help with stress. She's been really kind lately. I turned the page. Week 3. Feeling tired all the time. Maybe I'm overworking. Rachel says it's normal. My fingers tightened slightly on the paper. Another page. Week 5. Something's wrong. I don't feel like myself after taking them. I tried skipping one day, and I felt better. The handwriting changed, less even now, the lines pressing harder into the page. Week 7. I checked the bottle. No label, just codes. Why wouldn't she tell me what's in it? A small photograph had been taped into the corner. A plain container, unmarked except for faint printed numbers. I kept reading. The entries grew shorter, more uncertain. Week 8. I don't want to think this, but what if it's not helping? Week 9. I'm scared. I feel worse every time. The final page stopped me. I don't know what to do. If I tell Dad, everything breaks. Rachel wouldn't do that, would she? The sentence trailed off, unfinished. I sat there, the notebook open in my hands, the room quiet except for the faint movement of the curtain by the window. Rachel had brought her those supplements. Rachel had watched her get weaker. Rachel had said nothing. The details aligned too cleanly, each entry building on the last, each doubt written down as if Hannah had been trying to convince herself she was wrong. I closed the notebook slowly. For a moment, I didn't move. Then a sound shifted in the hallway outside, a soft step, barely audible, but enough to break the stillness. I looked toward the door. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I had come here alone. The floorboard creaked again, closer this time. "Dad?" Rachel's voice came from the hallway, steady, but sharper than before. I slipped the notebook inside my jacket and stood, my eyes fixed on the door. The handle shifted slightly, not enough to open, just enough to tell me she was there. "You went out earlier," she said, her tone casual, almost too casual. "I thought you'd be resting." I didn't answer. My gaze moved to the window. The latch was still loose from before, the curtain lifted slightly with the cold air pushing through the gap. Another step outside. "Dad?" The handle turned. I moved. 2 strides to the window, one hand pushing it open wider, the other bracing against the frame. The metal edge was cold under my palm. I swung one leg over, then the other, feeling the damp iron of the old fire escape beneath my shoes. Behind me, the door opened. "Dad, what are you?" I didn't look back. The railing was slick with rain, each step down careful but fast. My grip tightened as I lowered myself, boots scraping lightly against the metal rungs. The garden below was dark, the grass wet and uneven. I dropped the last few feet, landing harder than I meant to, then moved quickly toward the side gate. It gave with a quiet push. Cold air hit my face as I stepped onto the street. I pulled my phone out, my fingers unsteady but working. One name. Christopher Hayes. He answered on the second ring. "William?" "I need you," I said, keeping my voice low as I glanced back toward the house. A light had come on upstairs. "Now, corner of Harborne and Somerset." A pause. Then, "I'm on my way." I ended the call and stepped further into the shadow along the hedge, keeping out of the light spilling from the windows. Upstairs, a figure moved past the glass. "Rachel." She stopped for a second, looking out into the dark, as if trying to see past the rain. I held still, barely breathing. Then she disappeared from view. I didn't move until I saw headlights turning the corner, slow, deliberate. And for the first time that night, I had to ask myself, how long before she realized I was gone? Christopher's car pulled away from the curb without a word, the engine low, steady, the wipers moving in slow rhythm across the windshield. I sat in the passenger seat, the notebook pressed against my ribs, my eyes fixed on nothing in particular. His flat was quiet, small, functional, a place used more for late nights than living. He set a cup of tea in front of me, untouched, then turned on the television mounted on the wall. The screen flickered, then settled on the evening news. Breaking update from Birmingham University. I looked up. "A faculty member has been found dead this evening, Doctor. Julia Bennett, aged 49. Authorities are treating the incident as a possible suicide after a fall from the 4th floor of the Humanities building." The room went still. A blurred image appeared, flashing lights, police tape, the familiar outline of the building I had stood in less than an hour ago. Christopher lowered the volume slightly, but didn't turn it off. I didn't move. "She called me," I said quietly, more to the room than to him. He glanced at me, then back at the screen. "She told me to come, told me not to tell anyone." My voice stayed even, but my grip tightened around the edge of the table. "And now she's dead." The report continued, measured, distant. Words like unconfirmed, under investigation, no evidence of foul play. None of it matched what I had seen. Dr. Bennett hadn't sounded unstable. She had sounded afraid, focused, urgent. People who plan to end their lives don't warn others to stay silent. They don't risk reaching out hours before. I leaned back slowly, the chair creaking under the shift in weight. "This wasn't a suicide," I said. Christopher didn't answer right away. He muted the television completely, the silence settling heavier than the broadcast. "You think she was killed?" he said finally. I nodded once. "She knew something," I replied, "and she tried to tell me." The notebook lay on the table between us now. Whatever was inside it, whatever Dr. Bennett had seen, it had been enough to get her killed within hours. I exhaled slowly, my gaze steady. "We can't go to the police yet." Christopher frowned slightly. "Why not?" "Because right now," I said, "it looks like grief, speculation, nothing they can act on. And if I was wrong, if I walked in with this and said what I was starting to believe." I let the thought stop there. The room stayed quiet for a moment, the rain faintly against the glass. Then I looked at him. "We need proof. And if someone was willing to silence a witness that quickly, then the next person who got too close might not get a warning at all." We didn't sleep that night. We planned. Christopher cleared the small table by the window and spread out a rough layout of the foundation offices, corridors, access points, camera angles marked in pencil. He spoke quietly, precisely, the way he always did when things mattered. "You still have full access," he said, tapping the corner of the page. Found her credentials. No one questions that. I nodded, though the weight of it felt different now. That building wasn't just familiar anymore. It was a place I might not walk out of if we were careless. He slid a small device across the table. Signal loop. It'll freeze the hallway feed for 4 minutes. No more. 4 minutes, I repeated. That's all we need. Just after 1 in the morning, we parked 3 streets away. The city was quiet at that hour. Streetlights casting long reflections across damp pavement. Windows dark, except for the occasional glow from a late office. I pulled on a pair of gloves, stepped out, and crossed toward the side entrance. My key slid into the lock without resistance. The door opened with a soft click. Inside, the building was still. The elevator hummed faintly as I rode up to the 3rd floor, then opened onto an empty corridor washed in pale overhead light. Timer starts when you reach the hallway. Christopher's voice came through my phone, low and steady. I'm there. 4 minutes, starting now. I moved quickly, my steps controlled, counting each door as I passed. Room 312. Rachel's office. The handle turned easily. Inside, the air carried a faint mix of coffee and something floral, the same scent she wore at home. Everything was arranged neatly, files aligned, desk cleared, nothing out of place. I sat down and pressed the power button on her computer. The screen lit up, asking for a password. I tried the obvious ones first. Nothing. 30 seconds, Christopher said. I hesitated, then typed Hannah's birthday. The screen unlocked. I froze for half a second, then leaned forward. I'm in. Look for anything restricted, he replied. There, a folder labeled simply private. Locked. Give me the screen, he said. I angled the phone toward the monitor. A few seconds passed, then the folder opened. Emails filled the screen. I clicked the most recent thread. From Rachel Foster to Margaret Cole. The issue needs to be handled quickly. Below it, a reply. I can arrange something untraceable, gradual effect. Another message. Payment confirmed. Once she's gone, control transfers cleanly. We proceed with the fund. My hands didn't move for a moment. Hannah wasn't just a target, she was an obstacle. The next line made it clearer. The foundation stays within the family, no interference. Money. Control. The foundation I built. 50 seconds, Christopher warned. I took out my phone and captured every screen, each message, each timestamp. Time. I closed the folder, shut down the computer, and wiped the keyboard lightly with my sleeve. The chair slid back into place with a soft sound. I stepped out, locked the door, and walked back down the corridor at the same pace I had entered. Not faster, not slower. The elevator doors closed quietly behind me. When I reached the street again, Christopher was already pulling the car forward. I got in, shutting the door firmly but without force. He glanced at me. Did you get it? I handed him the phone. He read in silence, jaw tightening as his eyes moved across the screen. That's enough to prove intent, he said finally. I looked out through the windshield, the city stretching ahead in long lines of light and shadow. It's enough to show what she planned, I said. But not how far she's willing to go. The next afternoon, I walked into the foundation as if nothing had changed. The same quiet nods from staff, the same measured steps down the corridor. Rachel's office was empty, her assistant mentioning a meeting across town. It gave me just enough time. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The room was exactly as I had left it. Nothing disturbed, nothing out of place. I crouched near the underside of her desk and pressed the small recording device into the shadowed corner where wood met metal. It clicked once, then went silent. By late afternoon, I was back in Christopher's flat. He handed me his phone, the listening app already open, a thin line moving across the screen to mark incoming audio. We waited. At 4:18, the line flickered. Then a voice came through. Margaret, it's me. Rachel. Clear, controlled. What is it? Margaret Cole's voice followed, sharper, impatient. He's asking questions, Rachel said. He went to the university. A brief pause. papers shifting faintly in the background. That situation is closed, Margaret replied. Focus on the timeline. 2 weeks. Silence. Then Rachel spoke again, lower this time. I should have done it earlier. Christopher glanced at me, but I didn't move. She was always in the way, Rachel continued. Always his favorite. Everything revolved around her. There was no hesitation in her voice, no strain, just clarity. Well, Margaret said almost dismissively, that's no longer a problem. A quiet exhale, not relief, something closer to satisfaction. No, Rachel replied. It isn't. The line went still for a moment, then disconnected. Christopher paused the recording, the room falling silent again. I stared at the screen, replaying the words in my head, the tone, the absence of anything that might have resembled regret. Not once had she questioned it. Not once had she sounded uncertain. Christopher set the phone down slowly. That's enough, he said. I nodded, but my eyes stayed on the blank display. The evidence was there now, not just what she had done, but why. And more importantly, how little it had mattered to her. I leaned back slightly, my hands steady for the first time since this began. There's no turning this into something private, I said quietly. Christopher didn't answer right away, because we both understood what that meant. The only question left was where and when it would all come out. The Hilton ballroom was already full when I arrived, chandeliers casting a soft golden light across polished floors, glasses catching reflections as people moved between tables. Conversations blended into a low, steady hum. Donors, board members, press. More than 300 people gathered under one roof. At the center of it all stood the stage. Rachel was there, just off to the side, adjusting the cuff of her sleeve, composed, precise, exactly as she had always presented herself. Tonight was meant to be her transition, her moment to step fully into control of the foundation. She didn't see me at first. I moved along the edge of the room, unnoticed, my presence just another shadow among tailored suits and evening dresses. Christopher remained near the back, close to the control booth. When Rachel's name was called, the room quieted. She stepped forward, heels steady against the floor, posture straight, and took her place at the podium. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began, her voice clear, measured, practiced. This foundation has always stood for continuity, for legacy, for family. A few nods in the audience, soft applause. She continued, speaking about responsibility, about moving forward, about honoring what had been built. I stepped onto the stage. The movement was small, but enough to shift the room. Conversations stopped, heads turned. Rachel's voice faltered for a fraction of a second. Dad? I didn't answer her immediately. I walked past the podium, toward the center, where the light was strongest. I think there's something missing from this evening, I said, my voice steady, carrying farther than I expected. A ripple moved through the crowd. I glanced once toward the control booth. The screen behind us flickered, then came alive. The first image was simple. A page from Hannah's notebook. Her handwriting, uneven, pressed into the paper. The words enlarged across the screen, visible to everyone in the room. Rachel turned, her expression tightening. What is this? She asked quietly. I didn't respond. Another page appeared. Then the photograph of the unmarked bottle. A murmur spread through the audience, low but growing. Then the emails. Black text on white, names, timestamps. Rachel Foster. Margaret Cole. Payment confirmed. Gradual effect. Rachel stepped back from the podium. This isn't... The audio cut through her voice. Clear, unmistakable. I should have done it earlier. She was always in the way. The room shifted all at once. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. Phones lifted. Margaret stood from her table, her face draining of color. Turn that off, she said sharply. Rachel turned toward her. You told me this was secure. Margaret's voice rose, losing control. Don't you dare. You arranged it, Rachel snapped, louder now. You said it couldn't be traced. Gasps broke through the crowd. I stepped forward slightly, my eyes fixed on them both. Enough. The word didn't need volume. It settled over the room all the same. I looked at Rachel. Everything you needed to say, you already did. For a moment, no one moved. Then the doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Detective Morris entered with 2 uniformed officers, their steps direct, unhurried. Rachel's gaze flicked toward the exit, calculating. Then back to me. Dad, you don't understand. I understand exactly, I said. The officers reached the stage. Margaret tried to step away, but one of them intercepted her. Rachel stood still, her composure slipping just enough to show what lay underneath. The room had gone completely quiet now, every eye fixed on the same point. Detective Morris spoke briefly, his tone formal, measured. Rachel didn't resist when they took hold of her arms, but she looked at me as they turned her toward the exit. Not confused, not apologetic, just searching, as if trying to find something that was no longer there. The doors closed behind them. The ballroom remained silent, hundreds of people standing in place, processing what they had just witnessed. I stayed where I was, the light still on me, the screen behind now dark again. And in that silence, one question lingered, unspoken but unmistakable. What happens to everything that was built when the truth finally comes out? The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls, rows of benches filled with quiet observers, the air carrying a faint mix of paper and polished surfaces. Nothing about it felt dramatic, just contained, controlled, a place where things were decided without noise. I sat in the second row, hands resting on my knees, watching as Rachel and Margaret were led in from separate doors. They didn't look at each other. Rachel's posture was still composed, her movements measured, but there was a distance in her expression now. Something closed off. Margaret kept her eyes lowered, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The proceedings moved forward without delay. The prosecution laid out everything step by step, the notebook entries, the photographs, the emails, the recording. Each piece was presented clearly, without embellishment, projected onto screens, or read aloud in a steady voice. There was no need to exaggerate. The facts held their own weight. When the audio played, the room remained still. No interruptions. No reactions beyond the occasional shift in a seat or the quiet movement of a pen across paper. The defense spoke, but their arguments felt thin. Attempts to introduce doubt where there was little space for it. I kept my eyes forward. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was even deliberate. He outlined the evidence once more. The intent, the planning, the execution. No raised tone, no hesitation. Rachel Foster. Margaret Cole. A brief pause. You are both found guilty on all charges. The words settled into the room without echo. Life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. No one reacted immediately. Rachel stood still for a moment, her gaze fixed ahead, then shifted slightly, not toward me, but past me, as if looking at something beyond the room. Margaret exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping, as if something had finally given way. The officers stepped forward. I remained seated. There was nothing left to say. As they were let out, Rachel turned her head once, just enough that I could see the side of her face. I didn't move. I didn't meet her eyes. The door closed behind them. The room began to empty, quiet footsteps, low voices returning to the space. I stood, adjusted my coat, and walked toward the exit without looking back. And as the door opened to the corridor beyond, I found myself wondering, not about what had been decided, but about what, if anything, was left after it was all over. The office was quiet when the first applicant arrived. A narrow room overlooking the same gray skyline. A simple plaque on the door that read, Hannah Foster Memorial Scholarship. I had chosen the name carefully, not as a tribute alone, but as a continuation of something that should have had more time. The young woman who stepped inside held a folder close to her chest, her shoes slightly worn, her voice steady but careful as she introduced herself. She spoke about literature the way Hannah used to, not in big words but in small, precise thoughts that carried meaning. I listened, asked a few questions, then nodded. "Take your time," I said. "That's all this was ever meant to give." Later that afternoon, I drove out to the cemetery. The ground was still damp from earlier rain, the grass dark and uneven underfoot. 2 stones stood side by side beneath an old tree, Rebecca and Hannah. I placed the flowers quietly, adjusted them so they wouldn't slip in the wind. For a moment, I stayed there, looking at the names carved into the surface, letters that felt too permanent for lives that had ended too quickly. The air was still, no voices, just the faint movement of leaves above. Pain doesn't disappear. It doesn't resolve into something simple. But sometimes, if you let it, it can be shaped into something that remains useful, something that moves forward instead of stopping everything behind it. I stepped back, hands at my sides, and looked once more before turning toward the path. If you believe justice matters, be that voice. And tell me, when everything you trusted begins to shift, what would you choose to hold on to, and what would you be willing to let go?